area locations. Call a specialist today to schedule an assessment at 855-JUMPSTART or visit jumpstartmd.com.
A global pandemic, social unrest, and wild market swings. Welcome to the new normal. For investors looking for financial stability, it's a challenge. But now there's Reliant Capital. Reliant could give you high returns with no market risk of any kind, 10 to 12%. And it's eligible for an IRA or 401k rollover. Call 800-788-1000 and you could get the kind of returns Warren Buffett's been earning for years. Invest in something you can rely on. Call 800-788-1000 for your free brochure.
What's an investor to do these days? With a worldwide pandemic and economically turbulent times, you wonder, where can I find a reliable investment? Answer, Reliant Capital. Reliant could give you high returns with no market risk of any kind, 10 to 12%. And it's eligible for an IRA or 401k rollover. Call 800-788-1000 and call 800-788-1000 for your free brochure.
KSFO traffic time after this. This report is sponsored by ChooseMat.org.
When you're young, life is full of choices. Don't let opioids like highly addictive and deadly fentanyl take away your life or your choices with just one wrong pill. Find medically proven treatment options at ChooseMat.org.
We still have stopped traffic in San Francisco, northbound 101 after Cesar Chavez. We have a stalled truck in the middle lane. Right now, traffic is stopped from Sierra Point Parkway and experiencing about a 15-minute delay. Oakland on 880 southbound before 16th Avenue. We have a two-vehicle crash. The left lane is blocked. CHP still making their way to the scene. Things are stop and go from Oak Street. That's traffic. I'm Katie Green.
This traffic is sponsored by Prime Male Medical. Live a more satisfying life. Call Prime Male Medical now. Get a first visit, PSA test, testosterone test, ultrasound, and a year of follow-up visits for just $99. Call 415-761-4037. PrimeMaleMedical.com. Now here's something you don't hear much about guys on the radio anymore. He's live, he's unscripted, he's unrehearsed. He's Greg O'Donnell, and he's your personal financial advisor. Greg's not trying to sell you a book, and he's not so big and important that he'll be sending you to an offshore phone bank in a different time zone. And he's on at 11 every Saturday. Oh, and did I mention he's live? It's the Greg O'Donnell Financial Hour, Saturday morning at 11 on 560 KSFO.
Studio at the George Washington Broadcast Center. Jack Armstrong and Joe Getty. The Armstrong and Getty Show.
Ukrainian forces have been bearing down on Kherson for weeks. We meet a gunner just returned from the front who says the Russians are avoiding direct engagements and relying more on artillery.
Я не знаю причины, но Ймовірно, що так. Більше всього. Well, I don't know the reasons, but probably, yeah, there's a clear loss.
So we talked about this some yesterday as the Russians announced they're pulling out of Kherson, and the number of headlines, because I was looking for a lot of information on this yesterday, all the headlines said roughly the same thing. It's the biggest setback for Putin since the war started, or at least since he tried to go into Kyiv. It's a disaster for the Russian military. We thought we ought to talk to somebody about how big a deal this is.
Indeed, and Mike Lyons, military analyst, joins us. Mike served with various military organizations, both the U.S. and Europe, throughout his career, and is a well-known commentator on a number of networks, etc. Mike, how are you, sir?
Hey, guys, great to be with you this morning.
Thank you. It's great to have you. What was your reaction to the news that it was announced on high that the Russians were withdrawing from Kherson?
Well, I think actually Russia avoided a disaster. So what would have been a disaster is they're on the western side of the Dnipro River, and they had anywhere from 20 to 30,000 troops on that side of the river. And I think what would have been a bigger disaster if those troops surrendered. And then you have a real Russian problem. So Russia, it looks like they're finally getting general officers that are kind of getting it, understanding the situation on the ground. It's almost taken 9 months. But in order to, kind of save the troops and fight for their day, they're going to bring them to the eastern side of that river, knowing full well the Ukrainian military doesn't have any capability to conduct a military-type river crossing in an offensive operation. So Russia general says, we're going to save these troops, we're going to bring them back here, and now the long war is on for the wintertime to just kind of shut things down. So I think that Russia averted a disaster, and while it does look like defeat on their side, it really is going to save Russian troops for a future battle, of which Ukraine still just doesn't have enough men.
Well, it's interesting to me how many things have happened through this whole campaign that aren't any different than if we were talking about war 1,000 years ago. Getting to the other bank of the river before winter. Right. I mean, that's some classic old-timey military stuff right there.
Yeah, for all the technology and precision bombing and all kinds of things, it does come down to geography. And Army guys like myself always look at that as well. And this is what they're trying to do. And it's pretty clear that you've got to save these troops to fight them for another day. I mean, look, Russia's going to Russia. What that means is they've got this kind of fighting in their DNA for the last 100 years and the last 1,000 years. They're not going to stop. They're going to continue to use what weapons they have to strike deep into Kyiv. They're going to continue to try to take out infrastructure. The weather in Ukraine there is not tundra. It's not Moscow. It's not this. They're going to freeze them out. I guess I had a good analogy yesterday. I was talking to a friend of mine, and we said it's kind of like southern Illinois, Kentucky weather in the winter. It gets cold, but it's kind of survivable. So there's not going to be this challenge. Ukraine can kind of get through this. I was talking to another guy yesterday, and another high-ranking guy. We were talking about the where this thing's going, and it looks like Q2 of next year at some point both sides will be just exhausted, and perhaps we'll start to negotiate. But you're not going to see Russia quit, at least through the winter.
Well, so just to clarify then, I think you've made this point, the withdrawal from Kherson should not be read as some sort of trend or sign of weakness per se. It's just a reasonably intelligent strategic move.
Yeah, exactly. And we want to prop up the Ukraine side. We want to obviously see them do well. They're on the right cause for freedom and justice, and the Russians are the bad guys here. But Russia's just doing what they have to do in order to fight for another day. So again, I don't look at this as their defeat, and I'm sure they're not telling their troops that. They're trying to basically save 20,000 troops, because if 20,000 troops surrender on the east side of that river, that's the disaster. That would be something that would be the big victory that Ukraine then could claim.
Well, I'm thinking about all the times that Grant pulled back to regroup and just kept at it. I'm referring to the Civil War.
Not Ulysses S. Grant, not Hugh Grant.
Not Hugh Grant.
To clarify,
exactly.
Okay.
So I guess that explains why it was announced. Because when I heard it yesterday, I thought, why are the Russians announcing this with not glee, but certainly with such confidence? Well, I think you've explained it now.
Yeah, and so looking at other ways, like normally in a regular military operation, now the Ukraine's on the offense, they would call this pursuit operations, but that pursuit stops at that river. They don't have that capability. They'd have to cross that river with 3 times the amount of men in order to have any kind of assured success to try to do that, and they just don't have that kind of capability. The West will continue to support them, no question about it, and that'll last for a while, but I think you're going to see a real stop in some of the fighting there in the southern region.
So I find myself curious, Mike, if the United States was tasked with crossing that river and doing what needed to be done, what would that look like logistically, and what is it that the Ukrainians lack?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think a lot of it, though, is we wouldn't put ourselves in that place, because we would have now looked to taking that position across the river already. We would have prepped that area, and we would have tried to have cornered them before our enemy escaped. I mean, that would have been our commander's intent, but they just, again, don't have that kind of manpower to do that. So, they were not able to take advantage of something that we would have done. We would have had the capability in order to really surround those 20,000 troops and try to make them surrender. But now, if we had to do that, it would take months of planning, and it would likely we wouldn't do it right away either, given our military kind of what we do. It's old-fashioned, ribbon bridges. It's old-fashioned people up front, getting shot at. It's old-fashioned storming the beaches at Normandy. I mean, there's no kind of technology that's going to do that. It's going to take brave people in order to get out in front and face the enemy in a line of fire.
Well, that's really interesting. So even if the mighty, advanced, well-funded U.S. military were going to try to cross that river, it would take months of planning and pull it off.
Yeah, we probably wouldn't do it until the springtime.
Wow,
and
interesting.
We'd put people in place, and we wouldn't even try.
I would like your reaction to this headline. This is from the Wall Street Journal, but I saw it a number of places. The U.S. refuses advanced drones for Ukraine to avoid escalation. The Biden administration won't give Ukraine the Gray Eagles, despite pleas from Kyiv in a bipartisan group of members of Congress. How do you feel about that? Are we only arguing with ourselves in this whole escalation thing, or does that make sense to you?
Well, no, I think we have to be careful on escalation, and we're doing everything we can to try to